Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I used to work the graveyard shift at a gas station just off Route 46, a quiet stretch of highway between two small towns. No one really stopped there unless they absolutely needed gas or were pulling over to sleep in their car. This was about a year ago. I was picking up extra shifts to pay off some heavy medical bills. My name is Connor. I was 26, living solo, and I honestly didn't mind the isolation of working all night. The station was small, 2 pumps out front, a cramped convenience store inside, and one of those old walk-in freezers you had to kick open. We rarely got traffic after midnight, so most nights were a breeze. I'd stock shelves, listen to true crime podcasts, or just watch moths bang against the glass doors, desperate to get in. That Thursday night, around 11:30 p.m., started out the same. The air was dead still, like even the wind had quit. I noticed a black pickup truck pulled way off in the far corner of the lot, past the pumps, half hidden by the fence line. It wasn't at a pump, and no one got out. I figured the driver was maybe catching some shut-eye. Not unheard of, but something about the angle, like it was intentionally concealed, made me uneasy. I kept glancing out the window, but there was zero movement. Just that truck, idling in the dark. A couple of hours crawled by. After midnight, I started telling myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe it had left and I hadn't noticed, but when I went to the back to toss the trash, I peeked through the side door and saw it was still there. Lights off now. Silent. A cold dread settled in my chest, the kind of feeling you get when you realize you left your front door unlocked. It was too far and too dark to read the license plate, so I headed back inside and threw the deadbolt on the front door, just in case. Around 20:15 a.m., I was behind the counter stocking cigarette cartons when the lights suddenly flickered, then cut out completely. Total blackout. I froze. My first thought was a power outage, but then I heard the distinct pop of the security camera system shutting down. Not just the lights. Everything died. A second later, the side door flew open, followed by the heavy thud of multiple sets of footsteps. My brain switched to sheer panic. I didn't stop to count them. I just sprinted toward the walk-in freezer in the back, praying they hadn't seen me. The freezer door was heavy and loud, but I managed to slip inside without making too much noise. I yanked it shut, hunkered down between stacks of frozen pizza and bags of ice. My breath plumed white in the cold air. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped my phone trying to open it. I dialed 911 and whispered what was happening as quietly as possible. The dispatcher told me to stay hidden and stay on the line. Her voice was barely audible over the sound of footsteps echoing through the store. At least 3 distinct male voices, all sounding furious. One of them kicked something, and I heard the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. The longer I stayed, the more frigid it got. I hadn't grabbed my sweatshirt from the counter, and the metal floor under my thin work shirt felt like a sheet of ice. Every noise outside was amplified 10 times in that silence. Drawers yanking open, shelves crashing over, the beep of the cash register being forced open. Then one of them said something that stopped my heart. Check the back. See if anyone's here. I held my breath until my chest burned. I could hear the footsteps drawing closer, slow and deliberate, as if they already knew someone was hiding. The freezer wasn't soundproof. I could hear the person moving right outside, tapping on walls, opening storage doors. At one point, the freezer handle jiggled. Just a single, quick pull, then silence. I don't know if they missed it, or simply assumed it would be locked from the inside. But that pause, those 2 seconds of them standing inches from me, with only a steel door separating us, felt like an eternity. I was so tense I thought I might pass out. Then they walked away. A moment later, maybe 5, I heard its sirens. Distant at first, then rapidly growing louder. The voices outside became frantic. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was sheer panic. Things crashing, running footsteps, the side door slamming shut again. I stayed completely still, literally and figuratively frozen, until the dispatcher told me officers were on site. Even then, I didn't move until one of the cops opened the freezer and called my name. My legs were numb, and they had to help me stand up. I'd never felt so relieved and so profoundly terrified all at once. It turned out the guys had been casing the station for a while. The truck wasn't random. They had parked there a few nights before, too, but I'd been oblivious. The police explained they were monitoring our camera angles, timing the traffic flow, and locating the station's weak spots. They'd cut the power from an external panel behind the building, something I didn't even know was accessible without a key. The scariest part was their intent. They weren't just after the cash drawer. They had brought zip ties, duct tape, and even a taser. I try not to dwell on what might have happened if I hadn't reached that freezer so fast. The detectives were professional, but you could tell they'd seen worse. One of them, Officer Ramirez, told me directly, hiding was the smart move. These guys were not small time. They hadn't caught them yet, but they had solid leads. The truck had been stolen a week prior from a town 2 hours away, and was found dumped behind a closed diner off the highway. Fingerprints were smudged, but boot prints in the dirt around the station matched 3 different sets. Whoever they were organized and ready to use violence. I quit that job a few weeks later. I couldn't handle the night shift anymore. Every creak in the walls, every car that slowed down in the lot, sent my heart racing. I moved in with my brother for a while just to steady myself. I still check door locks more than I should. I still look over my shoulder in every gas station. The odd thing is, they didn't take much. Some scratch-off tickets, a few $100s, a display of vape pens. But the fear, that's what they really stole. It felt like it followed me home. I think about that moment constantly. The freezer door handle twitching. What if he'd pulled harder? What if the hinges had squeaked? What if I'd dropped my phone? What if I'd hesitated for just 1 second longer out on the floor? It makes you understand how fine the line is between a story you recount and a headline someone else reads about you. I don't know who those men were or what their ultimate plan was. But I know they were professionals. And they came incredibly close to succeeding. I've been working as a security guard at St. Gabriel Medical Center in downtown Denver for a little over 5 years now. The night shift isn't for everyone, but it suits me. Fewer people, quieter hallways. I've always preferred the calm that descends after midnight. I'm 36, divorced, no kids, and most of my free time is spent either restoring vintage radios or watching old crime documentaries. Nothing too exciting. But I found a lot of comfort in the routine, knowing the hospital layout by heart, doing my rounds, nodding to the same worn-out nurses every night. That was until last November, when a shift that should have been routine turned into something I still can't fully grasp. That night started like any other. It was cold, in the low 30s, the kind of wind that rattles the vents and makes every door groan a little louder. I remember drinking stale coffee from the vending machine around 20:15 a.m., scrolling through the shift logs, waiting for the janitorial team to check in. They radio in every time they move to a new floor. Simple, standard procedure. But around 20:30, I realized Raymond, one of our newer janitors, hadn't called in since the basement level. He was assigned to floors 1 through 4, and we usually heard from him every 20 or 30 minutes. I waited a few more, then radioed him. Nothing. I tried twice more. Still nothing. That's when I pulled up the surveillance footage. Raymond's route looked fine at first. He started in basement storage, moved through the laundry corridor, and took the service elevator to the second floor. He even waved to a nurse in the hall. Everything was normal. But then I watched something that made my stomach drop. Around 20:12 a.m., he entered Wing C, an old part of the hospital that has been completely locked down for months. Renovation delays, no patients, no staff. The only way in is a double-door system that requires a keycard clearance above his level. Even I have to call Central to get the override code. The strange part. The doors opened for him as if they were already unlocked. He looked uncertain, glanced around quickly, and then stepped inside. The doors closed behind him. He never came back out. I immediately radioed the on-duty nursing supervisor, Erica, to confirm if any emergency maintenance had been authorized for Wing C negative. No reason for anyone to be in there. I did a quick check of the keycard logs. No use, no override request, and the doors didn't even register as having been opened. I grabbed my flashlight, clipped on my badge, and went straight there. I wasn't panicked, but I had that gut-wrenching, crawling feeling that something was seriously wrong. When I got to Wing C, everything looked untouched. The kind of untouched that generates a weird, heavy stillness. The lights were dim, the air was colder, and the only sounds were the faint hum of fluorescent tubes and my own boots echoing down the hallway. I started checking rooms one by one. Most were empty patient rooms, stripped of equipment. The last time I'd been in Wing C was 2 months ago for a fire drill, and it felt eerie then. Tonight, though, it felt hostile, like the walls were closing in. About halfway down the hall, I noticed a rolling supply cart angled near room 307, partly blocking the door. Raymond was nowhere in sight, but a used mop was propped against the wall right beside the cart, like someone had literally just stepped away. I called out his name. "Raman!" My voice didn't echo. It simply died midair. I waited. Silence. That's when I noticed the cart had no hospital label, no department tag, no inventory slip, just plain metal. It seems insignificant, but in a hospital where everything is strictly cataloged, that's incredibly odd. I radioed again, this time requesting backup, but the static kicked in hard. That happens in Wing C sometimes. Bad signal, dead spots. But it felt suspiciously convenient. I pulled out my cell phone to call Central Dispatch. No service. I kept moving. When I reached the storage room at the end of the hall, the lock was clearly busted, pried open with a tool. The door wasn't fully closed, so I pushed it open slowly. The second I did, the smell hit me: sweat, metal, and something sour, like spoiled meat. My flashlight beam wavered as I stepped inside, and that's when I saw Raymond. He was on the floor, restrained with zip ties around his wrists and ankles, his mouth covered with duct tape, eyes wide open. His head jerked when he saw me, like he was fighting to stay conscious. I rushed to cut him free, my heart pounding. He was soaked in sweat, trembling, and had dried blood on the side of his face. I asked who did this, what happened, but he kept whispering. He said he worked here. He said he worked here. Over and over. I had to physically help him down the hall until one of the orderlies finally arrived to assist. We got him to the ER. Eventually, after receiving fluids and sedatives, he started to give more details. The man who attacked him was wearing scrubs. He gave his name as Kyle and claimed he was doing rounds. He had a badge, a stethoscope, the whole setup, but Raymond noticed the badge didn't match the uniform. When Raymond hesitated, the man got behind him and choked him until he blacked out. When he woke up, he was tied up and alone in that room. Later that morning, the police reviewed security footage from the other floors. They briefly spotted the man near the cafeteria vending machines. Just a single, blurry frame. He had on blue scrubs and a visitor pass clipped low on his waist, as if he didn't want it clearly seen. It turns out he wasn't staff at all. He was the older brother of a patient who had been admitted a week earlier for psychiatric observation. Apparently, the brother had a history of violent incidents, and had been forcibly removed twice before for aggressive behavior toward nurses. No one knows how he acquired a staff badge or where he got the uniform. Our theory is he followed someone into a staff-only area and simply blended in. That was the last anyone saw of him. He slipped out before the sun came up. Security measures were drastically tightened after that, camera updates, key cards replaced. But I still can't figure out one thing. Why did he take Riemann? Why tie him up in a sealed-off wing? Why not just escape or hurt him worse? Raymond ended up quitting a few weeks later. I can't blame him. He didn't even give notice. Just left his badge on the breakroom table and vanished. I ran into his cousin at a gas station a couple of months later. He said Raymond had moved out of state and refused to talk about the incident. He still wakes up thinking he's back in that storage room. I don't think he ever got past the realization that someone could just stroll in, dressed like one of us, and disappear like smoke. We both knew that part of the hospital wasn't just neglected, it was vulnerable. Forgotten corners always attract the worst kind of attention. I stayed on the job, but I never looked at Wing C the same way. Sometimes on slow nights, I scroll back through the footage from that week, searching for something I might have missed. A shadow, a software glitch, anything. But all I ever see is that moment where Rahman hesitates outside the door, and the system lets him in. The police claimed the attacker likely forced the doors open with some kind of tool, but that doesn't account for the logs. No forced entry recorded, no signs of tampering, just silence. It was as if he was supposed to be there. As if the system didn't even register him as a threat. That's what keeps me awake sometimes. Not the violence, but the quiet way it all unfolded. I started checking every badge I saw after that, even on nurses I've worked with for years. We had a mandatory meeting telling us not to profile anyone, but I couldn't help it. Once you realize how easily someone can slip into your world unnoticed, you stop trusting how secure that world really is. About a month later, I passed a guy in the elevator wearing the exact same shade of scrubs. My chest seized up. He gave me a casual nod and stepped off on the 3rd floor. Nothing happened, of course, but I checked the staff directory that night and couldn't find anyone with his face. Maybe he was from another facility. Or maybe I just missed his ID tag. But part of me still wonders if he was studying me, if he recognized me. A few people here started calling it the ghost shift. Not because they believed in spirits, but because of how fast it happened. How someone came and went without leaving a physical trace. I've stopped trying to find a logical explanation. There's something about hospitals at night. The way the lights hum, the way time stretches and bends when no one is around. You start to realize that the scariest things don't come from outside. They come from within, from people, from the places we believe are safe. I still work nights, still make my rounds. But every now and then when I walk past Wing C, I slow down just for a second, and I listen, because sometimes, I swear I can hear the door click. The substation hiding in the walls. I was working the night shift at a rural police substation in western Nebraska when this happened. It was 2019. I had taken the job 6 months prior because it was quiet and I liked the solitude. My name's Megan. At 32, I was divorced and trying to get a fresh start after leaving Omaha. The substation was just outside a town called Prairie Bend. Population maybe 800 if you count the livestock. Most nights, I just handled radio calls, logged reports, and drank way too much coffee. The building was small, a one-story concrete block with a few holding cells, an evidence room, 2 offices, and the dispatcher desk facing the front door. We didn't have a jail or a full-time officer on duty after 10 p.m. It was just me, a computer screen, and a radio. The exterior lights buzzed like dying insects, and the gravel parking lot was barely lit. Around midnight, Officer Reynolds radioed in, letting me know he was finishing up a DUI transport to the county seat, and wouldn't be back until closer to 200 a.m. For a while I was alone, or so I thought. Around 12:45 a.m., the landline rang. When I answered with the standard, Prairie Bend substation, "This is Megan," no one spoke. Just dead silence. I figured it was a prank or a pocket dial and hung up. 15 minutes later it rang again. Same thing. Complete dead quiet. No wind, no breathing, nothing. The third time it rang, a strange chill went down my arms. The number was blocked each time. I've gotten weird calls before, but the timing and the absolute silence felt wrong. I decided to walk the building just to shake off the nerves. It was a dumb idea, but I felt this physical pressure on me, like the air had thickened. I grabbed the flashlight and walked past the holding cells. Nothing. The evidence room was locked as usual. Then I turned toward the side hallway leading to the back entrance, and I froze. The heavy steel door, which should have been secured from the inside, was slightly ajar. Just enough to let in a sliver of outside light and a wave of cold air. I remember whispering, "Nope, hell no." My heart hammered against my ribs. I backed away slowly, quietly, as if trying not to disturb something. I couldn't hear movement or footsteps. Just an unsettling quiet, like the whole building was holding its breath. I slammed the hallway door shut and locked it, then sprinted back to the dispatch room. My hands were shaking so hard I fumbled the keys twice. Dispatchers aren't issued weapons, and I wasn't about to play hero. I grabbed the office keys, ran to the sergeant's office at the end of the corridor, and locked myself inside. That room had no windows, a solid steel door, and a secondary lock. I shoved a heavy filing cabinet in front of the door anyway. Once inside, I killed the overhead light and crouched behind the desk. I was sweating through my shirt, listening for any sound. Every tiny noise, the creak of the H-face, the hum of the vending machine, sounded like someone breathing just inches from the door. I whispered into the radio to request backup from county. The dispatcher confirmed they were sending a unit. Estimated arrival 25 minutes. That's an eternity when you think someone is creeping down the hall toward you. I stared at the thin crack of light under the door, waiting for it to go dark. About 10 minutes in, I heard it, a soft, metallic click. It came from the hallway, too far to be my office door, but close enough to know it was inside the building. Then something scraped gently along the wall. Not footsteps, more like fabric brushing against drywall. It moved past the office once, then again a minute later, slower this time. I felt an electric surge of panic in my chest, unable to take a full breath. Whoever it was, they weren't rushing to leave. They were trying to wait me out. I kept wondering, why aren't they breaking in? Why are they taking their time? Then came the sound that still makes my stomach turn. The doorknob to my office, my door, turned slowly and stopped. Just a subtle rattle, followed by total silence. Whoever was out there knew I was inside, and they wanted me to know that they knew. I clamped a hand over my mouth, desperate not to make a sound. No footsteps, no voices, just the occasional subtle shift, like someone adjusting their weight right outside. I kept the radio clutched in my hand, repeating to myself, "Hold on, just hold on." About 5 minutes before backup arrived, everything went completely silent again. No movement, no sound, just stillness. Somehow it was worse than the noise, like they had either given up or were planning something far worse. I didn't dare move the cabinet or make a sound. Then, without warning, the hallway lights flickered once. That was my final cue. I squeezed the mic and whispered again into the radio, begging for an ETA. The dispatcher confirmed they were pulling into the lot. I nearly cried with relief. When I finally heard the heavy front door open and the sound of boots on the tile, I almost collapsed. I stayed put until Officer Reynolds called my name. Only then did I shove the cabinet aside and unlock the door, still clutching the flashlight like a weapon. 2 officers were there, Reynolds and a county deputy. They immediately began clearing the building, It took them 15 minutes to finish the sweep. They didn't find anyone, but they found something else. The side door had definitely been forced open from the inside, like someone had unbolted it and used a screwdriver to wedge it open from within. Even worse, shaking, he answered, in the supply closet near the holding cells they found a used water bottle, a granola bar wrapper, and a dirty blanket tucked behind a shelving unit. The sickening truth hit me all at once. Whoever was making those calls, whoever tried that office door, had been hiding there for hours, probably since early evening, maybe before my shift even started. They had been watching me the entire night, listening, waiting. They never found the person. No prints, no ID, nothing that led anywhere. The security cameras in the back had been broken for over a week. A maintenance ticket, still pending. After that night, I never worked alone again. I transferred to the main county office 6 months later. But I still think about that night, about how close they were. And I can't stop wondering what might have happened if that door hadn't been locked, or if I had opened it when they first called my name. I don't scare easily, but that night, that one changed me. The service road, a silent witness. I've been working night shifts for highway maintenance for almost 7 years now. I genuinely like the quiet. No traffic, no people rushing you, just me, the asphalt, and the low hum of the truck. My name is Travis, 38, divorced, and I live about 40 minutes outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I mostly work on the back service roads near I-81, the ones everyone forgets about until something goes wrong. That night started like any other around 10:30 p.m. I was heading toward mile marker 212, where a traffic camera had flagged a vehicle that hadn't moved in hours. Dispatch logged it as a potential breakdown. When I pulled up, the van was sitting awkwardly on the shoulder of the service road. No hazard lights, no cones, just an older white Chevy Express, rusty around the wheel wells. The windows were tinted darker than legal, which instantly gave me a bad feeling. It was backed up close to the tree line, far from the main highway, as if someone wanted it hidden. I walked up with my flashlight and knocked on the driver's window. Nothing. No movement, no sound. I tried the door, it was unlocked. The smell hit me first. Sore, metallic, and sharp. It wasn't just old food or spilled coffee. I hunt in the fall, so I know the scent of blood, and this was that, but worse. The interior looked mostly empty until I stepped around the back. That's when I saw it. A crumpled black hoodie soaked in what was clearly blood, with torn duct tape still stuck to the fibers. Next to it, a pair of zip-tie ankle restraints, and a plastic grocery bag containing a woman's tank top and leggings, both stained red. My throat constricted. I froze, completely unsure what the hell I had walked into. I backed away, my hands shaking, and grabbed my radio. I told dispatch exactly what I found and asked them to send state troopers ASAP. They told me to stay put and secure the area. While waiting, I kept scanning the area, trying to figure it out. An accident? A setup? Then I noticed something. Off to my left, about 30 yards into the woods, there was a figure standing between the trees. Barely visible, but I could make out the shape of a person just watching me. No flashlight, no phone glow, just stillness. And then they moved, not toward me, but slipped back into the dark like they were never there. I stood there frozen, staring into the woods, trying to convince myself it was just an animal or a late-night hunter. But the way that person moved was too fluid, too deliberate. I called it in again. Told dispatch I saw someone in the woods nearby. They asked if I felt threatened. I didn't even know how to answer. I wasn't hurt, but I had that gut feeling that told me to get the hell out. But I stayed. Protocol demanded it. About 10 minutes later, I saw the first patrol car pull up behind me. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I briefed the young officer. I told him everything: the van, the clothes, the person in the trees. He looked spooked but remained professional. He started taping off the area and calling in backup. Within 30 minutes, 2 more cruisers arrived, and they began a search of the tree line with powerful flashlights. But they found nothing. No footprints, no broken branches. It was as if whoever, or whatever, I saw had vanished into thin air. One of the detectives, an older woman named Detective Rowan, pulled me aside. She asked if I'd heard the news earlier. I hadn't. She told me a woman named Chelsea Grant, 29, had been reported missing by her sister around noon that day. She'd left for a morning jog and never returned. The description matched the clothes in the bag almost perfectly. My stomach dropped. That van wasn't just suspicious. It was likely the last place that woman had been alive. I just kept replaying the image of that figure in the trees. They towed the van for evidence and told me I'd likely get a follow-up call. I stayed behind while they packed up, just watching the woods, scanning the shadows. I kept wondering why the figure had just stood there. Why didn't they run immediately? It felt like they were studying me, like they wanted me to see them. That idea messed with my head more than anything else. What if I hadn't seen them? What if they hadn't wanted to be seen? I barely slept that night. I kept my phone nearby, but mostly I just stared at the ceiling, thinking about the van, the bloody clothes, the person in the woods. Every creak in the house made me jump. The worst part was this feeling I couldn't shake, that I had been watched long before I ever noticed them standing there. Shaking days later, Detective Rowan called. She asked more questions. Then she mentioned something that gave me chills. The van hadn't been reported stolen, but it didn't belong to Chelsea or her family. It was registered to a man named Alan Proctor, a name flagged in a previous assault case from another state. But when they went to his last known address, the place was abandoned, just like the van, just like the woods. Over the next few weeks, I kept checking the news. Chelsea's body was never found. Just the van, the stained clothes, and silence. I returned to my regular shifts, but I started carrying a sidearm, not for animals, but for peace of mind. Every time I drove that same stretch of road, I'd slow down near the spot where I found the van. A few months passed, and the nightmares started to fade. Life moved on. But last week, something happened that brought everything flooding back. I got a letter, no return address. Inside was a grainy photo, taken at night, showing my maintenance truck parked right beside that van. The angle was from the woods, from behind me. Written on the back of the photo in red ink were just 4 words. You saw me first. I used to work nights as a delivery driver for a local food app in Kansas City. The money was decent, especially on weekends when the tips were better. This happened about a year ago in the early fall. I remember because it was just starting to get cold, and I had a nagging head cold you get when the seasons change. I was 25, living alone, and doing delivery full-time while trying to figure out my life. That night started off like any other. I had just dropped off a pizza to a college dorm when I got a high-paying order, marked as a group order, for a warehouse party on the industrial edge of town. Big tip included. It sounded weird, but honestly, I didn't question it. Money was money. The address led me down toward a part of the city I usually avoided at night. It was one of those forgotten industrial zones with broken street lights and massive buildings that looked like they hadn't been touched since the 80s. When I pulled up, the warehouse was huge and completely dark, with no other cars nearby. That immediately struck me as strange. For a party, you'd expect noise, lights, something. But it was dead silent. The place looked abandoned for years, all rusted siding and cracked windows. I double-checked the address. It matched. The order note even specified, "Come to the side gate. Bring food inside. Just knock." I drove up to the gate and immediately got a terrible feeling. First, the chain securing it was hanging loose, like someone had cut or bent it. One of the locks was literally lying on the ground, cracked open. The gate itself looked like it had been violently pulled sideways to make room for something to slip through. I paused there, the bag of food on my passenger seat, staring at the entrance. My gut was twisting. Something felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. I grabbed my phone and called the number attached to the order, more out of curiosity than anything. The guy picked up on the first ring. His voice was calm, unnervingly so. "Yeah, just bring it inside. Side doors open," he said. I asked if he could meet me at the gate, since the area felt sketchy. He chuckled a low, short sound with no humor in it. "Come on, man. I'm already inside. Just bring it in." The way he said that, it felt performative, like he was trying to sound casual, but it didn't sit right. I didn't respond right away. After a few seconds of silence, he added, "Don't worry, we're all waiting. We're all waiting. Not, 'I'll come out,' not, 'we'll meet you.'" Just that phrase. It sent a chill through me I couldn't shake. At that point, every instinct was screaming at me to leave. I'm not paranoid, but this whole situation was profoundly wrong. I hung up without another word, engine idling, staring at that massive metal building. The windows were pitch black, with zero sign of life. No music, no shadows, no footsteps. If there was a party in there, it was the quietest one I'd ever seen. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Next to the side door, half hidden in the weeds, a crowbar lay on the ground. It wasn't tossed there, it was placed neatly, like someone had set it down and planned to use it again. Suddenly, the phrase, "We're all waiting," echoed in my head again. Except now it sounded like a threat, not an invitation. I looked back at the street, completely empty. No streetlights, no passing cars, just my headlights reflecting off the warehouse wall. I took one last look at the order bag, thought, "Screw this," and threw the car in reverse. I peeled out of there fast, turning down the nearest street that led back to a main road. I drove about 3 blocks before pulling over in front of a gas station. I sat there for a minute, heart pounding, trying to process what had just happened. I've done hundreds of deliveries, but nothing had ever given me that kind of dread. I called the app support line to report the address as suspicious, but they just told me to cancel the order and move on. That wasn't enough, especially with the broken gate and the tool lying there. So, I did something I've never done. I called the non-emergency police line. I explained the situation, gave the address, and insisted something felt seriously wrong. The operator seemed unconcerned at first, but the details about the broken lock and the crowbar caught her attention. She said a patrol car would check it out. I didn't expect anything to come of it. I figured they'd drive by, see nothing, and that would be it. I went home still uneasy, and tried to sleep, but I kept hearing that voice, "Just bring it inside. We're all waiting." Around 3:00 a.m., my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I answered anyway. It was the police. The officer asked if I was the one who reported the warehouse on Haskell Avenue. I said yes. He paused before telling me they'd gone to check it out. What he described next made my blood run cold. The building was empty. No lights, no party. But inside, near the back, they found a folding table with several items laid out: zip ties, duct tape, latex gloves, and a roll of black trash bags. There was also a burner phone with no contacts, and a stack of unused fast food delivery bags. No one was inside, and there were no security cameras. Whoever called me was gone by the time they arrived. I sat there, gripping the phone, staring at the wall in the dark. It hit me all at once. This wasn't a prank or a mistake. Someone had lured me there on purpose. They wanted me to come inside. The table wasn't for a party, it was for me, or for someone like me. I kept thinking about the specific instructions. Bring it inside. Just knock. They were trying to get me to cross a boundary, to step out of my car and into that dark space where they'd be waiting. What would have happened if I'd knocked on that side door? If I had listened, the officer asked me to come down the next day to give a formal statement. The app number was already deactivated, and no payment had ever been processed. The whole order was a fake setup. I asked if this had happened before, but the cop was vague, only mentioning that the area had seen usual activity. I quit delivery work the next week, cold turkey. I couldn't shake the thought that if I had hesitated less, if I had stepped out of the car to be polite, I might have ended up as a missing person. I still check the news sometimes, hoping to find an explanation. But nothing ever comes up. It's like it never happened, except that it did. I still remember every detail. The silence, the crowbar, that voice saying, "We're all waiting." Sometimes I wonder if someone else took a delivery to that warehouse after me. And if they walked in,